All right, what's going on, guys? Simple Sports back. Another episode for you today. Going to talk about the NFL draft and a couple of points I want to touch on. But really quickly, I do want to talk about the Sixers and Celtics game. Game one last night is in the books. Solid game to watch. It's what the playoffs is all about. First off, I do love the Celtics, even as a Lakers fan. And the reason I say that is you have to appreciate the last two seasons that they've had as a whole. There is zero quit in this team, and part of that is the personnel and their mentality, and a big part of that also is Brad Stevens and the way he coaches, the way he does things, and his mentality. You saw that all the way back in the Butler days, and you see it in every team that he coaches, and as far as year to year, they don't quit, and I do love that. No one gave them a chance, including myself. I didn't think that they'd be viable this year in the playoffs without Kyrie Irving or Gordon Hayward and Marcus Smart and Jaylen Brown, and they still just continue to take it to the Eastern Conference. I love it. Like I said, it came out of left field for even myself. I didn't pick them to make it out of the first round. Definitely didn't pick them to make it out of the second round versus the Sixers. I still don't, but man, what an effort they put in to the game last night. It was awesome to watch. Long term, I think this is the final road for them this season. My take from last night overall is just Philly just looked a bit overwhelmed. They had some rust. Looked like they were awful from three. They were the awful shooting, period. They looked young for the first time. They looked overwhelmed and sort of inexperienced for the first time. There were a lot of plays where the Celtics just simply made a great basketball play, and Philly just didn't really seem to know how to adjust to it. They had a couple of mismatches in the post, and instead of taking a bad three or a contested three, they don't necessarily have a superstar on their team in terms of name anyway, someone that you would just expect to just start pulling up from 30. They would get it to the best possible matchup on the floor, and they did that pretty much all night, and that's how they got the win. The Sixers had no answer for Terry Rozier, and the Celtics shot 49% from three versus 19% for the Sixers. And anytime you have that big of a discrepancy, you can almost guarantee that will result in a loss for the lesser team. Listen, it was game one at home, and the Celtics shot the ball incredibly. It's hard to overcome that no matter what team it is. They made 17 threes last night. I don't expect that to continue for the entire series. One important note that I think will not change is Joel Embiid. They have no answer for him. And I mean, at points, it was like watching a man among boys. It was kind of refreshing in the third and fourth quarter to see Philly just kind of say, you know what, we're out of this game at the moment. Not out of it, but we're struggling in this game. We don't really know what to do. You guys can't stop Joel Embiid, so we're going to put him on the block. We're going to dump it into him, and he pretty much capitalized on every single one of those, and fairly easily. It was a sight to see. It was a throwback to sort of when I grew up as a kid, and I say that as if I'm old, but just 10, 15, 20 years ago, just watching Kobe or Derek Fisher just dump the ball in Shaq, because it's like, you can't guard him. We need 2 points. Here, give Shaq the ball. It's that simple. And it was similar to watch with the Sixers. They would, they dumped it into Joel Embiid and basically said, you can't guard him. We need a bucket. Get us a bucket. It was a nice sight to see. I see the Sixers winning this in 6. I think Boston might get one more game at home, even potentially game 2. But that's it. I still think it's about overall talent when you get to the playoffs. Everyone's effort is going to pick up, at least in theory, everyone's effort should pick up. The coaching on both sides is great. I think Brad Stevens is the better coach, but it's not like he's so much better that it's a huge gap. It's more. I don't want to say marginally because it's almost discrediting, but my point is the gap between the two isn't so distant, right? And so once you get to that point and everyone is sort of in an even playing field, it then becomes about talent. Who has the best talent? And Philly just simply has more talent on their team than Boston does. So I think that the Sixers will come out of this in 6, but man, the Celtics have zero quit in them whatsoever. And I love it. I love it. But let's get to the draft, get to some NFL stuff. I can't wait for football season. Football is undoubtedly my favorite sport to talk about, to play. and things of that nature. So I want to talk about the draft a little bit, and I want to talk about the Tom Brady thing and all that stuff. I'll get to that at the end. So obviously we had the draft this past week. I don't necessarily watch the draft as far as live, other than like maybe the first 10 picks or so. And also I like to see who Tennessee takes, depending on how high their pick was. They had, I think, the 23rd pick first this year. I obviously follow the draft. I just don't sit in front of my TV for 3-4 hours and watch the whole ordeal. It's just not that entertaining to me. But Baker Mayfield went first overall. I don't think the Browns made the wrong decision, but I don't think they made the best decision. I think Baker Mayfield will be successful. I think he's an accurate quarterback. I think he's a fighter. He's a winner. He's a gamer. And those are the type of players and people that I like. And if I were going to have someone on my team with those characteristics, that's what I'm looking for. I think he'll be a huge part in making the Browns relevant again. And that's my point. I think he's a great quarterback. I think he's going to be a solid starter for years to come. I think he's going to be very successful, but I don't think he'll be a long-term solution, as in like a 15 to 20 year quarterback, like another Tom Brady or a Drew Brees or like a Phillip Rivers. I don't think he's that. But I think over the next 5 to 7 years, he can definitely have them be a 500 team sort of consistently, or even slightly better. Maybe even make the playoffs a year or two. But I don't think there's going to be any serious title contention in the AFC between them. There's just a lot of teams outside of them that I think are much farther along and a lot younger at the quarterback position as well. And so it's not like those teams are on the way out. Like, for example, New England, you can say what you want, but they're not going to be that good for the next 10 years with Tom Brady, because he's not playing another 10 years. So at some point within the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, they're going to, I don't want to say they're going to fall off the map, but they're certainly going to take a step back, much like LeBron James and the Cavaliers. Even if they were to win the title this year, right, the window for them is going to close in the next 3, 4, 5 years, and that's obviously if LeBron James stays. And I think that's the same sort of scenario in AFC. You have New England and Pittsburgh, but Ben Roethlisberger doesn't have 20 years or 10 years left in him. Neither does Tom Brady. A lot of the other quarterbacks are young. They're upcoming. They have good defenses. So I think you're going to start to see some turnover, and I think you're going to start to see the Browns take a step forward in the right direction towards their next franchise quarterback at some point, hopefully. But like I said, I think Mayfield is, all things considered, I think they'll take that. They can't stay what they are for any longer. You're going to start to hear all sorts of things coming out of that organization if they were to do that. I don't think that they will. I think they have a lot of talent on the team and on paper anyway, and I think you're going to start to see some of that talent turn into wins now that they have a solid quarterback. Again, I don't think he was necessarily the best choice, but I don't think he was the wrong choice. And you have situations like that. There are a lot of times where you may make a decision that isn't necessarily a wrong decision, but it's not the best decision. There's a right answer and there's a better answer. And I think they got the right answer, just not the best one. Saquon Barkley went second, and much like Baker Mayfield, I don't think he's wrong, but not the best. I've heard comparisons to Le'Veon Bell, and I personally don't see that. I think you can give the ball to Le'Veon 25 to 30 times in a game, whether it be in a passing game or rushing or a combination of both, and which obviously it would be. And I just don't see that sort of workload with Barkley. And I think given all the weapons that the Giants have on offense, you have Ingram, you got Beckham, you got Shepard, and I certainly think Barkley fits in that system and with that personnel, and I think he'll be extremely productive in his role. I just don't see this superstar running back like everyone else does. I think he's a better version of Reggie Bush and Christian McCaffrey, someone along those lines. Again, a better version of that. I think he's a lot more explosive. He's a lot more physical than those two. But I don't see Le'Veon Bell. I don't see someone who is a workhorse back. If you wanted to, if you needed to, you could give the ball to Le'Veon 25 to 30 times a game. Handoff. You don't even have to pass it to him. If you needed to, you could do that. And I don't see that kind of production out of Barkley. So for that, I don't think he was the best choice. But given the team, given their personnel, I think he'll fit. And I think he'll be very, very, very productive in that offense. But we'll see. So overall for the first round, I don't think any of them were necessarily bad picks, except for Denzel Ward at number 4. Not that Ward himself is a bad pick, but in my opinion, at least, it is not the best decision they could have made at number 4. I thought Bradley Chubb or Minkah Fitzpatrick would have been the better pick, just from I guess from a best player available standpoint. I don't know that Bradley Chubb was number 1. Again, I'm no expert, so what do I know? I personally thought it would, or excuse me, I definitely don't think that Denzel Ward was number 1. They obviously think different. I thought it was Bradley Chubb as the number 1 and maybe as a 1B or certainly number 2, Minkah Fitzpatrick. Again, I'm not saying Denzel Ward is a bad pick or a bad player. I think he's a solid corner. I think he's going to do well for Cleveland. I just think that they should have gone a different direction with Chubb or Minkah Fitzpatrick. But that's just my opinion. And then obviously with Tennessee, I was happy with them getting Rashaan Evans from Alabama. They have a solid defensive line, a solid secondary. Neither one of them are great. They certainly have some better than average players on both, but certainly a solid unit. They needed a little more thump and a little more nasty in the middle of the defense, and I think they got that with Evans. Also with Harold Landry, they got another potential pass rusher, which is something that they need as well. They have it. Gerald Casey is not a pass rusher. He's capable of getting to the pass rush to the quarterback, but he's not a pass rusher. You don't get him to be a pass rusher. He is a run stopper. He's one of my favorite. I think he's the best defensive player as a whole on the defense because he does so much to occupy double teams, to stop the run, etc., etc. But they certainly needed a pass rush. Derek Morgan is solid. Arakpo is solid. Neither of them are outstanding. And I'm not saying that Harold Landry is going to be outstanding, but it is the extra push that they need. And he could be. You never know. But I think he's another piece that they were lacking on the defense as far as the pass rush, because there were a lot of times last year where quarterbacks just went untouched for entirely too long and the defense got picked apart. And considering that they've been playing a lot of man-to-man defense, especially with the Dory Jackson who they got last year, so obviously pass rush, especially when you play man-to-man defense, is very important. So pumped about that. I'm super pumped about next year in general, man. I just can't wait to see how this team comes together as a whole. Derrick Henry taking over the backfield. I'm going to miss DeMarco Murray. He was awesome. I hated him when he was in Dallas. Didn't care when he was in Philly. And I was pumped when we signed him a couple years ago to be our running back. He was nothing but awesome. And I wish we could have kept him on the roster, but it is what it is. So Derrick Henry taking over the backfield along with the new addition, Dion Lewis, who I'm super pumped to have the smash and dash philosophy back in Tennessee. Haven't had that in quite a while. New head coach and a very creative offensive coordinator in LaFleur and Vrabel, which was lacking last year. I thought our offense last year at times was pretty elementary. And I think that's part of the reason why Mariota struggled. And I think a lot of people don't see that. Again, that's part of my issue with people just looking at numbers. Half the people out there don't even know who our coordinator was. And half of them didn't watch the games and definitely didn't watch all of the games. The offense at times was just elementary. It was like one read, 2 receiver routes, and if it's not there, toss out of bounds. When you have this guy who is arguably off the top of my head, is probably the fastest quarterback in the NFL, and you don't utilize him nearly as much in that regard as you should. And I don't mind that necessarily because he seems to be, I don't want to say injury prone, but he's certainly a little fragile. We saw him get injured twice in his first 2 years. So I'm okay with him not running 15 times a game. Like, he's not Cam Newton. But certainly there were times last year where I thought he should have run or should have been running. And I know over the course of like a 5-game stretch or so, maybe even throughout the rest of the year when he had the hamstring issue, that obviously limited him from running as much. But still, the offense, like I said, it was a bit elementary at points last year. And I think that contributed to his sort of mediocre numbers overall. But I don't think it's because Mariota's a bad quarterback. Like I've said many times. I don't necessarily think he's an all-time great. I don't think he's even maybe top 5 in the league. But I personally would take him over. I mean, I think he'd make off the top of my head, I think he'd make the top half, the top 12 or so, top 14 quarterbacks in the league. Like, it'd be hard for me to find 12 to 13 quarterbacks better, or that at least that I personally would take over Mariota. And not a lot of it isn't necessarily skill set. A lot of it is the mentality and the fight. He willed them to the playoffs and to a playoff win last year with the block in the Kansas City game towards the end of that game to seal it, because that game was not over. And the third down run that he had against Jacksonville, like, that made Mariota my favorite player since Steve McNair and Eddie George. So I'm rolling with Mariota all the way. And then obviously we picked up Malcolm Butler. As a first corner, I wouldn't be 100% sold on it. As the second or third option, as a nickel corner, or something along those lines, I love it, and I think he's going to do well for us. Obviously they got Logan Ryan, who he played with back in New England, and Adoree Jackson, who at times last year looked great and at times looked pretty bad. He got beat on a lot of plays. Some of them he was honestly in great position. I remember watching one, I believe it was against Seattle, and the ball and the throw and catch from Wilson to Baldwin, I believe it was Seattle that they were playing. It couldn't have been more perfect. Like, the ball was like an inch off the ground. It hit the pylon, or it was right next to the pylon. And Adoree Jackson dives down, hand is over the ball. It couldn't have been a better throw. Or if it was an inch any other direction, it would have been incomplete. So you had a lot of plays like that, and that's the thing that some people just ignore. They simply look at the stat line, and they don't see plays like that. So I have all the confidence in the world in him. And then obviously Byard, one of the better safeties in the league last year. So we'll see. Like I said, I'm pretty pumped. Vegas has him at 7.5 wins next year, and I'm happy because they always fly under the radar. They flew under the radar last year. I think last year they were at 7 or 7.5 wins. And then they won a playoff game. So I hope they continue to fly there this year as well. I really do, because it's the less pressure and the less things outside of winning games that you can add to your plate, the better. So them flying under the radar may be a blessing in disguise. So we'll see. But I'm pumped. Game tonight between the Cavs and the Raptors. Game 1. We'll see how that goes. NFL draft is come and gone, so we're pretty much counting down the days, at least I am, until NFL starts. In the height of the NBA playoffs, I love sports, man. This is what it's all about. Like, I was so pressed to get home from work today so I could start talking about this stuff, get everything set up to watch the game tonight. I'm about to go cook dinner and do all that happy horse, you know what. So I will see you guys in the next one. Take care. Peace.